This week, much of America is talking about the court ruling that was related to a case that came to be known as Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia. And the SCOTUS ruling on this, which goes back to a question about Title VII law, does the word sex also refer to sexual orientation and gender identification? The ruling that was laid down by the court this week, the majority ruling that is, which was written by recent Supreme Court appointee Neil Gorsuch, surprised a lot of people, myself included, because it really was more in the spirit of recent years' cultural opinion rather than natural law, objective morality that our nation was built on and our judiciary. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. But I want to welcome you to the program, the T&G webcast. Alex McFarland here. Thanks for watching. And let's just talk a little bit about this ruling. Because from the 1960s civil rights movement and then the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, sex was a noun. It was your gender, male or female, and there would not be hiring and firing decisions that would be allowed which were based merely against somebody's sex. A business couldn't simply fire someone for being a woman or show preferential treatment merely because one was a male. But the Supreme Court decision this week basically expands the understanding of sex, not merely to be a noun, but as a verb. Sexual behavior, sexual orientation, or gender identification. And let me say this, folks, mark it down. We believe in the respect and the value of all human beings, but this decision, which is based on case law more than natural law, really is dangerous, I would say, because for the first time, a behavior becomes commensurate with an ethnicity. Now, the founders, and they wrote the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson did, ultimately the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They saw you as having what's called a penumbra of rights, a grouping of rights. Now listen very carefully if you would. Your penumbra of inalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and ultimately other court decisions and the writing of the Bill of Rights was done in view of this penumbra of rights that not only America's founders would have recognized, but really the great thinkers throughout all of Western history and even ancient history, Jewish, Greek, and Roman sources that would have agreed with what I would say, that your inalienable rights, life, liberty, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of religious expression, these are what are called natural rights. And when the founders used the word inalienable, they could be infringed upon, but not justly so. I mean, governments or individuals could definitely undermine your natural rights, but not legitimately so. And when the founders wrote the documents on which our nation is built, and court cases, at least up until recent years, were decided in light of moral objective truth, they would have never, folks, listen, they would have never thought that one's sexual desires or your sexual fetishes or your self-perception, maybe someone is born a genetic male but they decide to identify as a woman, or they decide to identify as a gender that has no description whatsoever, that's fine. You can believe whatever you want to believe about yourself, and you can believe what you want to believe about reality, but we can't let your subjective view of reality, which may actually be very unreal, your misconceptions about reality, your delusions about reality, maybe even your ill-informed perceptions of yourself should not be able to cause the rest of the world to have a less than real view of reality. But that's where we are. That's why so many people, I think, were very, very shocked by Gorsuch's decision. Now listen very carefully. I know a lot of people are writing articles and they're saying, well, he's a contextualist. He's interpreting the law very rigidly based on the meaning of the words. Great, super. It's good that he believes in the power of language. But do you know there is something even more important than the power of language and taking words to mean things, and that is the belief that there are objective, undeniable moral truths about reality and science. And so while I applaud Gorsuch for being a literalist with words, great, but he really did the American people and the president who appointed him a disservice by allowing sex to be expanded to mean behavior and personal subjective ideation, because it undermines our foundation of truth and morality. Now, let me roll a clip here in just a minute, and I want to bring up a name from about 4 or 5 years ago that you may have forgotten, but it'll come back quickly. The name Rachel Dolezal. You may recall Rachel Dolezal was the leader of an NAACP chapter in the upper Northwest, and she identified as African American. The problem is it came out that she, to the bone, her ethnicity is Caucasian, and she lost her job. But listen very carefully to Rachel Dolezal, because we're seeing the modern manifestation of some assumptions that she and many others had years ago. Watch Rachel Dolezal.
I believe that people have the right to feel the way they feel, and I appreciate those who really think critically about the topic of race and identity. And when it comes to a personal journey, I think we all have the right to our own stories. Does allowing fluidity in the race and culture spectrum do more to protect human rights than kind of, keeping the very rigid boundary lines?
Did those words impact you? Did you pick up on some of those cues? I'm going to come back to Rachel Dolezal in a minute, and we'll talk about the implications of believing that ethnicity and gender are fluid. But right now, I've got a question, and we love to hear from you. I thank you for the questions that people are sending in. And the question here is from Joseph Martin. Joseph watches, and I appreciate you watching. It's basically a question about a person who says they're a deist and very critical of Christianity. Let me unpack the word deist. And Joseph, thanks for sending in the question. A deist is somebody who believes that God did make the universe, but God kind of wound up the clock and walked away. Deism says there is a God, or there may be a God, but he doesn't intervene in the world. I would disagree with that. I would say that not only Scripture, but history itself shows that God is active in the world. This is not a deistic universe. God is not the absentee landlord. God intervenes in history. That's called miracles. God does act in history. And you know what? There was a great theologian years ago, Elton Trueblood. He said, many people have claimed to have experienced God. Many people have claimed to have had answered prayer. If even one of them is right, then God exists. And the people who have claimed to experience an active God include some of the best and brightest, most virtuous people of history. Everybody from Abraham to Aquinas to Mother Teresa to Billy Graham. The likelihood that they were all mistaken is very slim. Therefore, the greater likelihood is that not only does God exist, but God acts and God can be known. Joseph, thanks for watching. Deism, many people hold that view, just doesn't measure up to reality. I want to ask people to please share us publicly on social media. That will help us a lot. Please help us reach more people, and yes, get those page clicks up. And do you know what? When you share us publicly on social media, you're automatically entered to win a book. We give away a book every Friday, and today is no exception. We're giving away a book to Tiffany from Alabama. Tiffany, thank you. And you're going to be getting the book Stand Strong America. Stand Strong America, I wrote with my dear friend and colleague Jason Jimenez. Tony Perkins wrote the foreword, says it's a powerful book. Courage, Freedom, and Hope for Tomorrow. Tiffany, this is coming your way, and we thank you for watching the TNG webcast. Well, look, let's go back to the Rachel Dolezal quote. All right, listen to what she said. People have the right to feel the way they feel. Absolutely. But the way you feel, which may or may not be tied to reality, doesn't have the right or the power to change truth. Now, look, is ethnicity fluid? Is gender fluid? Everybody now says it is, including Neil Gorsuch of the Supreme Court. Now, me as an Asian female, I just think, now wait a minute, you're saying, what in the world is Alex saying? Look, I'm not an Asian and I'm not a female. I'm a Caucasian male. But look, in this world today, you don't have any right to critique my self-perception as an Asian female, because we're to the point, do you understand, where feelings trump science? Feelings trump reality in the minds of some people. We're on dangerous ground. And Rachel Dolezal and many activists believe that. She said that this gender and ethnic fluidity increases the chance for human rights. False. What we're doing is paving the way, opening the door really, for despotism and fascism. And look, the bad news is we have to live in light of reality and morals. But the good news is acknowledging moral boundaries and real truth, this protects your human rights. Friend, stand strong for America by standing strong for truth. We're in uncharted waters, folks. We've got to be people of courage, conviction, truth, and it begins with you and me as we lovingly but decisively share truth with our neighbors. God bless you. Thanks for watching TNG Webcast. Hey, pray for America and love your neighbor. And that's the true thing to do. See you soon.